Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this prong set cabochon pendant, and this is what mine looks like. So I just have this copper druzy cabochon that I wanted to set in a nice delicate setting with prongs, and then this is the back. I've just added a little design on the back. This is my initial. You can leave that blank or you can add whatever you'd want to, but I'm going to show you how to make the basic setting here today. So how to do the prong. I've previously done a prong setting tutorial for a cabochon as well, but that was more meant for a larger cabochon, so a bit more sturdy, whereas this is more meant for like a finer, more delicate cabochon like this. It's got quite a nice small size. So this is the pendant. I've also done a tutorial where I set a cabochon in a ring with prongs like this. So I've already done a tutorial for that as well, and the link to that is going to be in the description box below. So obviously they'll make a really nice set together if you want to make both. So if you have cabochons that are similar like this, make a really nice set. But in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make the pendant here with this nice delicate setting. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that we're going to be needing. Now I've got two different gauges of regular round wire, and I'm just using a copper wire here. The first one is a 0.8mm. This is going to be the base of the setting and also make the actual prongs. Then this is a 0.25mm. It's a really nice fine wire. I'm going to be using this to wrap and basically secure the base in place and also to make the bail. Now I'm just going to be using this because I want quite a fine look to my pendant. You could also use say a 0.4mm to wrap with. It's just going to give you a little bit more of a different look to it, but you could easily use either one. It's completely up to you. And then finally, you of course need your cabochon, whichever one you want to work with. The one that I have here is a 2 by 1.5 centimeter oval cabochon, and this is just a copper coated druzy quartz cabochon that I'm using. I thought it would be really nice with the wire as well. So obviously I'm using copper wire with the copper cabochon here, but again you can use whatever cabochon size and shape that you want to, so you can use other shapes as well. You just have to obviously adjust the shape of the setting itself. So let's get it all together and let's get started. The wire that we then need to work with is one length of a 0.8mm of about 25 centimeters here. Now because this setting is more for smaller stones, smaller cabochons that we're doing, then we don't really need that much of a length here to work with, because obviously it's just going to be covering a small area. It's just going to be for the actual setting, the prongs, and then also for the small bail that we're going to be attaching as well. So we just need the short length. And then as for the weaving wire here, so the 0.25 that I'm working with, for this I'm just going to be leaving it on the reel and working with it from the reel here. It's just purely to have as little wastage as possible, because it can be quite difficult to know exactly how much you're going to need. Now if you want to cut it off and you don't feel comfortable working from the reel, I would recommend cutting off about 1.5 meters to 2 meters. It all depends on the size of your setting, so the cabochon, and then obviously ideally you don't want to run out, but I personally prefer to then work from the reel. So the very first thing we need to do is make the base and the prongs for our cabochon. So what I'm going to do is get the cabochon out ready so I can keep referencing back to this as well, because we're going to obviously need to make the base for this in the shape of the cabochon. So like I said, this technique here can work for any shape that you want and any shape cabochon that you have. What you just want to do is adjust the bottom here, the base we're going to be making for that shape, and I'm going to be making it as I go. So I've got my cabochon here to keep referencing to, and then I take my length of 0.8mm wire, it's going to be the base, and then to start off with I'm going to be starting from the bottom here, the middle on the bottom, and just work my way up the sides, just also to help get the prongs nice and even. I'm also then going to be working with my 6-step bail making pliers just to help get the curve started really. It's not crucial, you can use whatever you have, it just makes it a little bit easier here. So I'm going to start with using the largest space on my pliers here, put them on the middle, roughly the middle of my wire, because like I said we're working from the bottom middle part and up the sides, so roughly in the middle of your wire. And I'm going to get my curve started to the bottom curve there. Now this step on my pliers isn't the perfect size, but that's why I'm just kind of more using it as a guide. So it fits pretty nicely, and then you can just open it out a bit if you need it to be a little bit bigger. Making sure we get a nice shape in place that basically follows the shape of whatever stone or cabochon. And what you want to make sure to do is when you're making this frame, the actual shape here that we're making needs to sit just inside of the outer edge of your cabochon. So as you can see here, That's just perfect. It sits just inside the cabochon. If you don't want to be sitting outside or even following it perfectly, because this is then also going to help from the cabochon slipping through. So this is actually going to support the cabochon on the back. So that's why you'll make sure it's on the inside. Then what we need to do is make the first set of prongs. Because on the cabochon, this is an oval one, and it's going to be the case on most shapes really. I want to make 4 prongs on this. So 1 on each side on the bottom here, and then 1 on each side on the top. So you have an equal hold all around the cabochon, so it's not going to slip out anywhere on any of the sides or anything. So I need to then judge where I want my first prongs to be. So I take my chain nose pliers here, and then what you can do is you can measure this with a normal method of measuring it out, maybe calculating out how long distance in between each, but for this case, because it's quite a small stone and quite a simple setting, I'm just going to do it by eye. What you prefer is completely up to you. I'm then going to hold my wire on top of the cabochon there on the back, grab my wire where I want my first prong to be, and then I want to bend this outward, so I'm going to put an angle in there, outward away from the shape, and bend it against your pliers. And then just straighten it out. You want to make sure as well before you start this, by the way, that your wire is nice and straight. By that I just mean that you don't have any obvious kinks and bends. It doesn't have to be straight. It's fine if it has a curve to it, but just so there's no kinks in it. So there we go. So that's the beginning part of the prong on the one side, and then while I'm at it, while it's quite easy to then get them even like this, I want to also bend my wire on the other side. So before I actually make the prong, I just find that to be a bit easier. So make sure this is straight, and then you place your wire, the shape that you're making so far, on top of it, and then you want to place your pliers on the other side on your wire there where you want the other prong to be. So it's equivalent on this side as you have done on the other side, so it gets as even as possible. Keep hold of that, and again you want to bend this tail away from your shape against your pliers here. Make sure it's nice and straight, especially right around here. We're going to then use this wire to make the prong with. You want to make sure that that wire, especially that part of your wire, is nice and straight, as well as you want the prongs to be as nice and straight as possible. So like this, it looks pretty good, because then my prongs are going to sit on each side there on the bottom part of my cabochon. So what we need to do now is actually then make the prongs themselves. Now to make the prongs, what we need to do is place our pliers somewhere, and then to figure out the length that we need our prongs to be, depending on the cabochon or stone that we're using, obviously, because you want the prongs to be able to capture it nicely and securely, but also without going too far in over the stone itself. So what you can do is just place your pliers here and bend it back towards itself to get the length, because obviously we want to make sure that the prongs are as even as each other as possible, especially if you have an even stone. Obviously if it's a teardrop, you might want some of them to be a bit shorter, or if you have an uneven stone, you might want some of the prongs to be shorter than the other ones. But what I find is, whenever possible, what you could do is you could measure the prongs if you want to get them even. Whenever it's possible though, what I prefer to do is get some flat nose pliers here that have a pretty wide head, so like that, compared to say a chain nose pliers. They've got a pretty narrow head, especially at the tip. But when I can do, as in when it fits size wise, what I prefer to do is use pliers like this, because when you look here, if you look just a bit below where the stone is and how far up these pliers come up, I find that quite often these are just the perfect size. And then when I use these to make my prongs all the way around, I guarantee that they all become the exact same size. So whenever possible, I prefer to try and do that, to just use some flat nose pliers to basically also use them to measure with. But obviously it's not always possible, but when it is, I do find that very helpful. So I'm placing my pliers all the way down towards where I made my bend till I won't go any further. Then we need to bend the ends, the tails, back on themselves all the way around to come back down next to itself. So we have something that looks like that. Now that's pretty open. What we need is to close up and tighten up the prongs basically to make it look a bit neater. So what you want to do is I like to kind of try and keep hold of it as best I can, also to not lose the shape of what I've made so far. And then I put my open prong there pretty far down towards the bottom, the base of my pliers. I get a bit more control that way. And then you want to start just squeezing it tight out towards the tip of the prong. So you're squeezing the two, well the one wire, but the two that are lying next to each other there, getting them closer and closer together so you don't have a gap in between them, right like that. So you can see now it's nice and tight. Now I want to do the same on the other side. So make a prong on there as well. But before I do that, actually I just want to remember to, it's a bit easy, you can do that, but they're going to overlap and maybe be in the way for each other. What I just want to do is bend this back out towards the side that we're working on. So again, you can either open up the prong a bit and get some chain nose pliers in there, just grabbing the tail of the wire. But what I like to do when I can is also use these. I'm going to grab around my prong, but only a light grip, because if I squeeze too hard, if I do it there, you're going to see that they can end up then actually flipping over. So you can end up having your wires stack on top of each other, which we obviously don't want. But then what I find is if I just do a light grip on here, on the bottom again as far down as they'll go, take my tail and bend it back towards, against my pliers, out towards the side there. I find that that's again then the perfect place to bend against my pliers to make sure I get my bend in exactly the right place. Now that's coming up the side of my cabochon, so if I just show you here, measure it against, got my very first prong, and that's the bottom here, and that's now coming up towards the side to get ready to go up towards the next prong. But we're not quite there yet. I want to just do the other side first. And this is just the exact same way. Place your pliers as far down as they'll go against that first bend we made. Bend the long tail back on itself all the way around your pliers there. So you have this open prong. Want to squeeze it tight so we have no gap in between the two wires lying next to each other, like that. And then we can just have a look and see now that's our second prong and it's looking good so far. To get your wire to come back out and up the side, place your pliers back on and bend your wire here against your pliers. So now this tail of our wire is also coming back up towards the side. And we can obviously just adjust it as we go. But first we just want to make sure that these prongs are nicely positioned and they look nice and even as well. And that looks pretty good to me. So now I want to come back up the sides, evenly on both sides. And obviously remembering this is an oval shape, so I still want to make sure that I have a curve on the wires on the side here. So if you don't have that naturally, you can always just do that with your fingers, warm up the wire, smooth it out if you've got any kinks in there, because it can easily bend while you're working with it. That's natural. And then you can just adjust it along the way. So we're coming up the sides. The other one here needs to just be adjusted a little bit. There we go. Now it's starting to look like something, because we're now getting to the point where we can make the prongs on the top here of where it's going to be perfect to then capture in the cabochon. And it's going to look nice and then even in relation to the bottom prongs. So this is as well, we're making the shape as we go and then just adding the prongs in along the way in the shape. And it'll be the same for any other shape of cabochon that you've got. You'll be doing the exact same thing, just following the shape of the cabochon and then putting in your prongs along the way. So I want to then make my next prongs, so what I'm going to do is judge where I want them to be. I just want this to go in a little bit further to make it more of the oval around the top as well here. Because obviously when you're making something as well, you want to try and make sure that it looks nice on the back. Because say, especially as a pendant, you're wearing it, chances are while you wear something on your neck, it's going to flip around. So it's always nice if the back looks nice as well. So just take your time whenever you're making something. And something a bit like that. And then I'm going to place it here. The bottom curve around the bottom part of the cabochon. Obviously the prongs coming out evenly on both sides. And then I'm going to place my pliers where I feel the next prong needs to be. Start with one side at a time. And then again, the tail from the wire that I'm gripping onto, bend that outward away from the shape. And while I'm at it, I just want to bend the other one as well. Just a bit more guaranteed to get it even. Grabbing onto the wire with my pliers. And then always before I do that one, I also just like to always look at it from the front. Because it doesn't hurt as well judging things by eye as we go, to make any small readjustments that we might need to. Get your grip on the wire and then bend this one outward as well, away from the shape. And then you can just adjust it until you're completely happy with it, rather than adjust where you have your bends now. So if we're looking at it, always reference back to your cabochon to see how it's going to sit on there. See if it's as even as you want it to be. So something like that. I feel like this one is just a little bit too far down. So before you make a full-on harsh bend on there, you can just gently unbend it a little bit and then get your bend a little bit further up. So something roughly like this. I think it's a bit better now. So there we go. So this is then where I want these prongs to sit. So now basically we're going to be doing the exact same thing that we just did with the bottom ones. So to make these prongs again, I'm going to be using these flat nose pliers here to make it easier, that bit easier to make the prongs themselves. So the exact same way that we did before, get your flat nose pliers if you've got some here that fit perfectly with the size prong that you want to use, that you want to have here. To capture your stone, bend your wire completely back on itself. Squeeze the prong to be nice and tight so you don't have any gap there. And then I'm going to also use my pliers, put them back around the prong, and then bend the tail here back outward to get back in towards making the rest of the shape here. We're getting to almost the top of the oval, where we're then also going to then make the bail like that, and make the last prong on the other side. My pliers in, bend my wire against the pliers all the way around back on itself. Keep hold of it. Try and keep it flat while I'm squeezing it tight with the base of my pliers here. So you can't see a gap ideally. So just like that. And again, get this tail come back outward, or rather upwards towards the top of the shape. Get a nice angle in there as well from the bottom of the prong. So there we go. Then obviously we're now working our way right towards the top, and then we can just adjust the bottom here, so the tails, which direction they're coming out in. And obviously we want these to be going around towards the very top of the cabochon there, in my case the oval shape. If you got a teardrop, obviously they'll most likely more naturally be coming up towards the tip there of the teardrop, but here I still need to make a bit of a curve around the top to then come in towards the middle. So again, just do that with your fingers, or you could also use the same pliers as I did earlier to help get a nice curve in there. It's completely up to you, what you feel most comfortable with. Until they're both crossing over each other at the top there. So then when we're at this point, where we made the shape here of the cabochon and then also the prongs, and we're happy with the shape compared to the cabochon, that it's going to fit just nicely, then what we want to do is just fix these ends of our wires here, because these are the ones we're going to use to create the bail as well. So I'm going to get my chain nose pliers out, and then what we basically want to do is just bend both of our wires upwards roughly in the middle there, so they meet in the middle. So I'm just going to grab the back one first, place my pliers where I feel is the right place to bend it, because we want the wires then to end up sitting next to each other. And remembering, when you bend your wire against your pliers, there's always 1 or 2 millimeters of space, so your wire doesn't bend exactly where you're holding it with your pliers. So I'm going to grab onto it and then bend it upwards against my pliers here. Trying to get this kind of on one side in the middle, this bend. Until we're happy with that. And also you just smooth out your wire as you go, because obviously this isn't going to be part of the bail, so we want to make sure that that wire is smooth. And the same on the other side. Place your pliers. Now it's the front wire that I have left. So something a bit like that. Wherever you feel is going to fit nicely to be in the middle, take it, bend it upwards as well against your pliers there. Get a nice angle in, and again smooth it out as well. And in there you can see the 2 bends that you made are going to sit right next to each other, right there in the middle. And then once you've done that and you're happy with that, I just want to spend a bit of time just to make sure that all this is smooth then. So just use your fingers, smooth it out nicely, so you don't have any kinks or bends in this wire. But then for now we're just going to leave those tails there. Not going to worry too much about what angle they're at yet, because we can still adjust it once we get to actually creating the bail. So it's going to look something like this. So now what we need to do is kind of go around the frame again and reinforce it. This is where we're going to bring in our weaving wire as well. So then I'm going to take my piece here that we got ready, and then also grab my 0.25mm wire, or if you're using the 0.4 then do use that one, that's completely fine. All depends on your personal preference. And then what we want to do is start on one side here, because they're not attached yet, and we're not going to do that until we basically start making the bail. But then what we need to do is start from one side at the top, and we need to work our way all the way around and basically coiling this weaving wire around the base wire there. So what I'm going to do first of all is just bring my weaving wire behind my frame. Just keep hold of the one side for now, and then we just need to start coiling. Now it's a bit fiddly if you constantly have to put it through there, plus we can't do that if we have it attached to the reel, which I prefer to work with. So what I'm going to do is just go through the opening every time, make it a bit easier and quicker, and then just coil it around right from that first corner. Go through the opening, and then keep coiling it and wrapping it around your base wire. And then once you've done a few, and we started getting the wraps in place, what I just want to make sure is that they're all nice and tight together. So all the wraps are as tight and even as possible. And we're going to start seeing a coil build up along from one side there along the base wire. We're basically just going to keep doing this. So I'm going to keep working my way down towards the very first prong, and then I'll show you just how we get past that one. So now that I kept working my way down here the side and I've reached my very first prong, basically all you want to do is keep going right until you hit the corner of that prong, and then all we're going to do is, I'm ready now, is just keep wrapping, but then just swap over to the other side of the prong. So all you do is, I'm coming through the middle there, just like I continue to wrap, and then I just swap over to the other side of the prong. And then pick it back, straight back up with the coiling just on the other side, and then I'm going to then fill in this whole gap between this prong and the next one. And then once I get to that, do the exact same thing, just skip over it, continue wrapping all the way around, skipping over every prong there until you reach right up to the other side on the corner there, on the other side of where the bail is going to be. So that's what you want to keep doing all the way around. It's going to add a bit more strength and also help keep your prongs more securely and sturdy in place. Now that I then kept going here, I've reached my way all the way around to the other side and passed over every single prong. So you can see, and it's still open here at the top, so that's what we're going to fix now, and also then start going into making the bail. So like I said, just make sure that these wires are nice and straight now before we start weaving onto them, because once you obviously then weave onto them, you can't really do anything about it. And then before we start as well, you just want to make sure that they have the right angle. So what I want is for both of them to be coming out from that midpoint at pretty much an equal angle to each their own side. So this one needs to come out a bit more, and that needs to go in a bit more. So just have a look at it here from the front to see how even it looks. I don't want it to taper out too much, but just a nice little tapering out like that. Obviously it's completely up to you what you choose to do, but that's what I personally prefer. You could also just choose to have them lying right next to each other and just do the weave with the wires right next to each other instead of open like this. Again, that's completely up to you. So now what I want to do is connect the two sides here and start making the bail. To do that, I'm going to use a simple figure of 8 weave, and right now I'm coming down between 2 wires here. So what I'm going to do is, I've ended up on this side, so I want to cross straight over to the other side. I'm coming down between, so I'll go behind the other one, come around, push down, and then go around this other wire on its own, and again down between the two. And what I want to do is, every time I wrap around one wire, I want to be doing it twice. So that means I need to go around that wire, the same one again, and down between the two. And this is going to be the weave that I'm doing. And then once I've done it twice on that side, I'm crossing back over to the other side, around once, down between the two, around twice, and down between the two. And then again cross over to the opposite side, and I go around that one twice as well. And this is the basic figure of 8 weave, using this to fill in this gap. It's going to then make the bail look nice and decorated. And cross over here as well. So you just want to keep going like this. Now, because this is quite a fine pendant that I'm making, I don't want the bail to be too overpowering. That's also why I chose to use the 0.25. But like I said, 0.4 is equally sufficient. You can use that. But all I mean is, I want to make sure that I don't make the bail too large. Because if you imagine, we're going to have this sitting here. So I don't want the bail to be as large or as long as this, the piece itself. I only want the bail to be just enough, basically, to be able to attach it to, say, a chain or whatever you want to hang it on. So I just want to make a nice and delicate bail as well. So what I'm going to do is keep weaving here till I reach the point that, for me, I think is going to be the midpoint. Basically the top of the bail, because then what we're going to do, say it's going to be around here. I want the length of my bail to be roughly this, and this, the top of my pliers, is where the midpoint of the bail is going to be, because we're going to then make the double length and then fold it, bend it backwards around a mandrel of some sort to get a nice shape, because obviously it needs to be open to get something through it. So that means we have to do double length of the actual length we want the bail to be. So the first half is going to be the front and the other half is going to be the back. And what I like to do is here, I'm tapering outwards until I reach that midpoint. Once I then reach that, it's going to be the size of my bail. We need to then taper back inwards again. But then when I get to that point, I'm going to show you how to do that. because that's a little bit more tricky. So just keep doing this until you reach that point that once you've folded it back, it's going to be the top of your bail. So now that we've reached the midpoint of the bail there, now I want my bail to start tapering inwards again. And then how I'm going to do that is grab my chain nose pliers, and then on one side at a time, right at the end of where our weave stops there, put it to the side, and then grab onto the base wire with your chain nose pliers, and then just make a gentle bend inward. Just a nice little angle. The same on the other side, so now the wires are going to be facing in towards each other. Something a bit like that. And you can always just adjust the angles until you feel like they sit just right. How close you want them or how far apart you want them. Bearing in mind, now we want to weave again, but up here, but it's going to be about the same length of the part there that we already weaved. So basically we want the two wires there, base wires, to cross over roughly where our weave is going to end. So something a bit like that. And then what you can do to make it a bit easier to weave, I just like to bend the ends of my base wires back outward to its own side again, so they're not actually crossing over. Makes it just easier to weave in between there. So now that we're happy with that, it's going to look something like that. We're going to continue weaving the exact same weave. The only difference is now we're weaving in an area where it's tapering inwards, and that's a little bit more tricky than when it's tapering outwards. Because what we're going to do is, again, I'm coming down through the middle, crossing over to the other side, and then what you'll find is when you're weaving when it's tapering downwards or inwards, your wire's going to want to slip towards that narrower point naturally. So it's not just going to work by weaving the same way that we did before. So what we need to do is, my last weave down here was on this wire. So what I need to do when I cross over to the other side is I need to hold that down, the last one that I did, and then push down on the opposite side. And once more around, remember twice around each side. So it's just holding the previous one in place while I do my next wrap. Again, come down between the two base wires. Now to cross over to the other side again. So I hold down the side that I just wrapped, like that. Just press it down with your nail or your finger, and then cross over to the other side. And then do your wrap on there. And that's the best way that I find to wrap and weave in an area where it's tapering inwards to get the neatest result, so you don't have your wires slipping down there. So just keep doing this until you reach that point where your wires are pretty much meeting and you've finished off the full length of the bail, and then I'll show you what we do next. Now that I've then finished weaving my bail here, it's time to get rid of some wires as well. So what I just want to do is get rid of this little tail. The very first little tail we had when we started out doing our wrapping around the frame. I want to just get rid of that because it's just going to be in the way. So I'm going to get my flush cutters and then cut it down so I have a tiny little tail left, like that. And then get my chain nose pliers, and then we just want to always make sure when you have little tails like that when you cut off your wire, you just squeeze it down, and I'm going to just roll it inwards there. So the actual end of the wire is going to end up in between the two base wires right here at the base of the bail. Because then it'll be out of the way of anything catching or scratching on it. So just like that, got rid of that one. So now I want to actually then start shaping the bail into the right shape. And to do that, what I'm going to be using here is just a thin little crochet hook, so a small one. You can use anything really. You can use bail making pliers, any form of mandrel that you have. I'm just using this because I have a set with loads of different sizes, which is really handy for needing different sizes to make different size bails. So I'm using the small one here because obviously it's a delicate pendant. I'm going to put it behind the bail, so this way you just want to decide what's going to be the front and the back if you have a preference. It should look pretty much the same anyway. But you put it behind your bail, a bit below the middle, because then we're going to take the top here and bend it backwards to get a shape around the crochet hook there, or whatever mandrel you're using. So you get a nice shape here, and with doing this graduated bail that I've done, so first of all graduate it outwards and then graduate it back inwards again, you get this really nice shape to the bail, I find. So something like this. So you can see from the side we have room to put whatever we want through, whether it's a chain or something. It'll fit through there. And then you have your base wires coming down at the back here. We can just straighten them out because we're done with making the bail, obviously. So you want to make sure that the end of your weave here on the bail ends right about at the base of the beginning of the bail. So about the same place. Make sure your weave is pushed nice and tight together. Then what we need to do is just secure the base of the bail here together, because obviously it's still open, as you can see, like that. So we need to secure those two sides together. So make sure you're squeezing tight. And then I'm going to use the tail that I have left that I actually made my bail with, so the weaving part on the bail. I'm going to use that to secure the two sides together. So I'm coming from behind the back part of the bail. What I want to do is come around towards the front. And you basically just want to find your way wherever you have space to weave the front and the back together. And then what you can try and do is place the wire here exactly where you want it to go, because then you can pull it tight and it'll kind of click in between the wraps or the weave that you did towards the front there, and just completely blend in, so it won't stand out or anything. And also with using such a fine wire, it'll blend in nicely. So like that, go around towards the back again. So there's nothing specific here, it's just a matter of finding a way to secure it nicely and securely. The other side, going through the other, around the other way here, back down through the front of the frame, to make sure I secure both sides of the bail in place. Go around in this corner again, get the wire into position exactly where you want it to go, so we can then just give a nice little tug and it slots right in and you get a little click there. So that's all there really is to that. Fastening your bail in place the best way that you find, and then once you've done that and you feel it's nice and secure, you can go around a few times if you want to. Then what we need to do is pretty much just finish it off. So then the first thing I want to do, because I'm happy with how this sits now and it's nice and secure, I want to get rid of the rest of my weaving wire, because we're done using that when we've attached the bail here and fastened that. So I'm just going to come down through again. This is the back of my pendant. Come down through, because what you always want to make sure to do when you finish off a weaving wire, whether it's this 0.25 or 0.4, whatever wire it is, you want to always wrap it around a single base wire a couple of times before you cut it off. And that's how you want to secure it, because that's what's going to hold it nicely in place. And then again, whenever possible as well, where you want to then cut it off, ideally when you can, always do it towards the inside of a project. So for example here, this is the back of my pendant. So I'll pull it towards the front, because then I'm going to cut it off here, and then I'm going to put my stone on. So my stone is then going to cover the end on this side of my wire, so I'm not going to have any end of my wire sticking out anywhere. So I've got it here, and then I'm just going to go in with flush cutters and cut off the excess. Just like that. And then what we can always do, again, just make sure any little end that you have, you squeeze it in wherever you can, so it blends in nicely. And there we go, we've now got rid of our weaving wire completely. And there we have the finished frame, and with the bail obviously. So all we have left now is these two ends of our base wires that we also just need to finish off. Now what you could do with these is make something fancy with them on the back. So use these ends to make a feature on the back, a design of some sort, so the back is also nice and interesting. You can either use them for that, or like I said, the one that I made previously. I made my initial there. This is a separate piece of wire that I did, and then I attached that. You'll also do that around this stage. You can either do that before we complete the bail, or after we finish off these base wires. But if you don't want to use these ends for anything on the back here, we can just finish them off like I'm going to do now. So what I'm actually going to do is, this is the back, I'm going to push them through my frame towards the front. Just do one at a time here, and the other one as well. So they're just sticking out towards the front like that, because all I want to do is then basically cut them off, but we want to make sure the ends are not sticking out towards the back. So again, I'm going to take my flush cutters here. I've got my 2 base wires now sticking out of the front through the frame, and all I'm going to do is cut them down because they're now sticking out towards the front. Remember, when we put on the cabochon, that's going to sit on top of them there, so the ends are basically going to be sticking in right at the back of the cabochon, so they're not going to be a problem in catching on anything. And what we want to do is cut them off right where the frame ends, basically. So we have that little play with the width of the frame. Obviously we don't want them sticking out any further because then they'll interrupt how the cabochon is going to sit, because we need the cabochon to sit nice and flat. So I'm just going to kind of use the frame as a guide here to cut them down. And if anything, rather cut them a bit too long, because you can always cut off a bit extra until you're then completely happy. Then say cut them too short, then obviously you can't do anything about that. Just like that. And I got rid of them. And then you just want to make sure that they're not too long. If they are, you want to cut off a bit more. I think I just need to cut a bit more at least off of one of them. And do the other one as well, just to make sure. But the actual ends of the wire are still just have a little slight bend inwards towards through the frame, basically. So that also makes it a really nice and neat finish, because you don't have any weird looking wire anywhere that you need to try and get rid of. Like I said, you can easily use these wires for something, a design on the back, but you don't have to. You can finish it off like this as well to make it nice and neat and delicate looking. So here we basically have the frame, and you can just double check against the ends that we just cut off whether they're going to conflict with the cabochon and it lying flat on top. If it is, you want to just cut off a bit extra. If it seems like it works just fine, then now it's basically just time to sort out the prongs and finish off adding in the cabochon as well. So to then get the prongs in place, again we need to be able to reference back to the cabochon just to make sure we're bending them all in the right place. So place it on top where it's going to sit. So basically it's just covering the frame there just perfectly, that we made to go just behind the edge of the cabochon. And then I'm going to hold it there and then do one prong at a time. So you then want to place your pliers right where you want the first prong there to bend, remembering it's not going to bend exactly where you're holding the plier, it's just going to add an extra millimeter or so to it. So something a bit like this. I think it's going to be pretty good. I'm going to keep hold of that and then put my finger underneath to help kind of leverage against. And then I'm going to bend, a little flick in my wrist to bend the wire upwards towards the front there of the frame. Remember that you want to make sure you're bending it towards the front and not towards the back, because obviously that's where the cabochon is going to sit. So just straight upwards like that for now. I'm going to put the cabochon back in to make sure I get the next one right. Place it where it's going to sit, and then you can also just check that first one if you feel like it's right. If it's a little bit too far out, then you can always just add a little bit extra bend, take it a bit further in. So rather adjust this a bit as you go, because it's how doing it at the end. So like that, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. Look from the top, from the front, to make sure the cabochon sits how you want it to sit. Put your pliers on your next prong, and then bend that upwards with your finger behind as kind of leverage against the prong. So straight upwards, just like the other one. And if your frame goes a little bit out of shape while you're doing this, you can always just push it back into shape. It's no big deal, because it is only obviously just a delicate frame that we made, because it's just a delicate cabochon that we have. So that's the first side there. and you can judge how it looks. I think I just need to bring that one in a little bit more, because you obviously want to make sure that your prongs are going to sit nice and tight around the cabochon, because if it's too loose, your cabochon is going to sit and wobble around inside the prong setting, which you don't want. And we can turn it around to make the other side. Place the cabochon there on top of the frame. Can be a little bit fiddly, but it's just until we kind of get the prongs in place. Then it's much easier to adjust, because then they already hold the cabochon a bit. Shape your next prong. Bend it upwards. So we're just working our way all the way around the frame here, one prong at a time, checking it as we go. So I can see it's actually a bit too loose, but we can still fix that by just tightening up the prongs a little bit. I'm going to do the other side as well. Put my cabochon in the prongs again, and that's much better already. The last one that we need to bend, grab hold of it, take your cabochon out, and then bend that one straight upwards as well, just like all the others. And like I said, don't worry too much if your frame goes a little bit out of shape. Mine has a little bit here because, like I said, it's a delicate frame, but you can just then reshape it. So that's the good thing. We don't have to worry too much about it. Keep shaping your prongs here. Make sure that your frame has the right shape. Just double check that your prongs look pretty even as well, to make sure that the frame hasn't gone too out of shape. And then we can just try it again. See how the cabochon is going to sit inside of these prongs. We haven't completely finished the prongs yet, because obviously if we get it in here, just need to straighten it out. The prongs are kind of now just holding the sides of the cabochon. We also need the prongs to hold the front, so when we turn it over, it's not going to fall out like that. So what we need to do to just finish off the prongs is just bend the very tips of the actual prongs. And the way that we do that is just by grabbing one at a time. And then I like to use my chain nails for this. Grab the very tip of your prong and then just give it a little kick inwards. So inwards towards the middle. Go all the way around. And do that with all of them, because it's then these little kind of claws that we're then making. It's going to grab around the top or the front of the cabochon and make sure that it doesn't fall out from the front. And again, just do a bit at a time, because we can always adjust this as we reference it against the cabochon. See how it holds. And the last one. Working your way around here. So I've now shaped all the prongs, the very tips there, to begin with, and then we just need to test it again, because obviously it might not be enough or it might be too much, so we just need to figure that out. Place your cabochon back in. You can either do that by putting it in on one end and then kind of pushing it in so it basically clips in place, a bit like that. Or you could also open up the prongs and then close them back up. That's also a way of doing it. So there you then have your setting. So a pretty nice and simple one, and you can leave it plain, nice and delicate like this. Or if you want it to, like I did with the other one, you can always just add a little feature on the back, because you have that open space. on the back there where you can put something if you want to. Some kind of designer like I did. I did an initial. So that's how you make this. So pretty nice and simple for a nice delicate cabochon, I would say. The setting suits. You can obviously wear whatever chain or you want to wear it on. Just put a chain through and make your own. I have several videos that show how you can make your own chain as well if you want to have a look at them. So that's how you make this setting. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful as well. And thank you very much for watching. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you a bit of wire work. And I thought with St. Patrick's Day coming up, I thought it would be the perfect chance to make a 4-leaf clover. So this is what it looks like. So I just made a 4-leaf clover pendant of wire work. So you can see the wire here. I'm creating the frame and the shape of it. And then I just added some green quartz gemstones to it to add a bit of colour as well. And then in the centre I've actually added a bit of a feature of a hat. So I thought obviously perfect for St. Patrick's Day. But other than that,